All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. We have the returning man, the man of the hour. I was just listening to him on the radio before we're coming on today with each other. This is Steve Laffey, former mayor of Cranston, Rhode Island, 2003 to 2007, former presidential candidate, 2024, financial guru. He's a man of everything, not just finance. But Steve, always a pleasure to have you on. Plenty of things to talk about. We don't have a lot of time, so we're going to roll through this quick. But Steve, thanks so much as always.
No, you asked a great question. Why don't you just roll with it? Because I'm heading out of the country, not because of anything happening here. I just got to go see my son in the Netherlands with my wife, who's at graduate school. But let's roll.
Right, Steve. So let's go to what everybody wants to know your opinion on is the Trump tariffs. Obviously, it seems like he's really taken on every country in the world. He thinks he's really macho man, and he's really controlling the tide here. I want to ask you the question. We can go through the countries in general, but specifically on China, they just upped it up to 84% of a tariff on us. So it seems like the people that are going to get hurt here because of Trump's stupidity on this and going against the whole world and not particularly, as you've stated many times throughout our conversations, particularly sticking towards China, we're just going to get ramroded as middle class Americans.
Yeah.
And the rich people will be doing fine because they can afford it. But the middle class is just going to get screwed even harder. And again, I think we're heading towards a society like the Middle Ages where there was the peasants and the serfs and not towards what we were pushing for in the 50s and the 60s with that middle class. But you
Yeah.
tell the audience, Steve.
And unfortunately, the middle class seems to be buying into the message of like incoming poverty. So just to and this is just because the public school system means people don't understand even what I'm probably about to say, but I'll be as simple as I can. Uh, if Donald Trump had just taken on communist China with trade and given it a number of years for people like Apple Computer, pharmaceutical manufacturers, things that are critical to the United States of America to get out, whether they moved all of it, and they can't move all, I hate to disappoint people, they're not going to move all of it to America, but they got out. And China was a weak country because of it. Um, that would be better. Instead, in his second term, Donald Trump promised tariffs on sort of everybody, and he gave them. In the sense that I want to go backtrack on one point. The United States of America is roughly, to be very rough, a $30 trillion economy. The rest of the world has $85 trillion. So if you take on one country at a time, you want to take on France? Go ahead, Mr. President, right? You take on all of them, you're 30 trillion, they're much bigger. And so that's what's starting to happen with this cockamamie idea about our allies need tariffs before our enemies. It just makes no sense. So then let's talk about China for a second, because to backtrack one big step, I've been saying publicly since 2005, we shouldn't be trading with them, but never suggested we would do it overnight. You go to 5, you go to 10, you pass laws within Congress that say we want all 60% of the cars the federal government's going to use in 5 years are going to be made in America. You make laws so that people say, oh, we have certainty, Intel. We're going to build chips in North America because we can sell them to Lockheed, and they have to be sold to Lockheed. They're not going to be made in China or even Taiwan anymore. Get it, right? Instead, because of Donald Trump's changing, and I last read this morning that he's changed his mind 85 times about tariffs so far since January 21st when he took office, roughly, right? When he's inaugurated. This is crazy because this builds uncertainty to the point where the head of France this morning said, don't invest in America. But if you take the second step just on China alone, because he's doing it so quickly, what they sell us, we actually really need. People aren't going to get their pharmaceutical drugs if they shut them off. This morning, China shut off all rare earth minerals again to America. We actually need them for a time until we can get our own, right? There's a lot of things like that. So since they're putting tariffs on, we're putting tariffs on stuff, and they're putting on stuff, ask yourself, what's the two biggest things we send them? Crops, oil. They are the two most fungible things that they can get elsewhere. We don't send them stuff they need. Obviously, they need food. They need oil. They can get more from Russia unless we sink the ships, right? So they are in a short term win situation that they don't have to do what we're saying, right?
Mhm.
They're in a long-term lose situation with demography and so forth. But the biggest mistake made was Donald Trump getting everybody mad at him first, all the Europeans, everybody in Canada, people booing America, our great allies, right? I mean, remember, it was the Canadian like ambassador to Iran who hid American hostages and hid people, right? They've always fought with us. They're original member of NATO with it, all these things. So we can do things with Canada, but you just can't make it up. But by taking on everybody at once and by stating that he has stated, I have it right here somewhere, he has stated that every single trade deficit with every single country is bad. That's not true. There are reasons that America will always have a trade deficit with another country. One, in the 60s, in the 80s under Reagan, we grew a lot faster than we are today.
Yeah.
We took down tariffs in those days, but forget it, but we weren't involved with communist China. But because we're so wealthy, we got to buy some stuff elsewhere. And because we're the world's reserve currency, we can at lower rates. So these things are going to happen with other countries, and we shouldn't worry about it.
Yeah.
Communist China is a whole different thing. So treating our enemies and allies the same is a very bad idea because our allies are going to go with our enemies and we're going to stand alone, which we shouldn't have to do.
I want to talk about China though, because are we going back of the fault of China? Obviously, 2000, the WTO, letting them in, that was obviously the catalyst there. But can we go back a little further and talk about Kissinger and
Yeah,
Nixon, where I
sure.
believe that was kind of the big deal. And then obviously 2000 was the whole shebang there.
Yes, the big deal was somehow Nixon going to China, opening up China at the very beginning, and started the whole process of there'll be a democracy. We'll work with them. This is, by the way, back when Mao and these other people, no one was working with them. It's the greatest fallacy of all time that you can work with dictators. I mean, Trump tried to work with North Korea. Their people are still, they're eating grass. The people eat grass. You've seen them in Ukraine get captured. They have no idea what's going on. You think our education system's in a bad way? Talk to a North Korean soldier. He had no idea what was going on until he found porn on a phone, it looks like, and he went crazy. So we don't want to head in that direction. So yes, it started with Nixon. But by the way, it really started with Truman. I mean, if you want to go way back, when the top general MacArthur, I'm sorry, said to MacArthur, "I don't know how to bomb half a bridge," because remember, China was helping North Korea. If we had finished that war correctly, we wouldn't have these problems. But we have decided since the Battle of Incheon that we don't want to win wars. We're still talking about Iran.
Yeah.
Like you're much younger than me. It's your whole entire life since you were born.
Yeah.
You've heard, now I've only started hearing this since I was 18, but I'm much older than you. From my age of 18, Iran has been killing U.S. troops, supporting anybody who will kill us or kill Israel, trying to send drones wherever they can now, and we've done nothing about it. Nothing. Now, I think there's a high hope that Trump will actually now, because he needs a war, he got to get the attention. This is a time they may actually bomb and then bomb that island where all the oil comes out of Iran from. That's a whole nother story, but that actually could happen now.
I want to go into the issue of the supply chain. Obviously,
Yeah.
we just talked about the tariffs. We saw what happened during COVID, which had nothing to do with tariffs. People were running to buy toilet paper like it was going out of style throughout COVID, and many other things as well. Supply chain for even food was very low in COVID, and some of it hasn't even gotten back to where it was pre-COVID. Are we going to be looking at more of that for a very consistent amount of time now? Because it seems like, again, Trump doesn't know where he's at. And again, you've talked about this many times throughout the program, that he is very much a narcissist and he just believes what he is doing is correct and no one can persuade him otherwise. It's his way or the highway. And that's not really how you deal with diplomacy with other countries. You don't go my way or the highway. You have to negotiate with other countries, especially your allies. And he, as you stated throughout this program, he's brushing them off and giving them the middle finger.
Yes, and that, is a really bad thing for economic growth in the world and for America and for our future. So, supply chains. I'm at Harvard Business School in 1984, and we get taught just-in-time inventory because the Japanese are doing, meaning you keep your supply as low as possible, make your inventory turns even faster, and you set up supply chains so you only get the stuff just in time to make it. You're going to make a car, you're gonna assemble this car tomorrow. The night before, the carburetor comes in from Mexico, right? Not three. You don't stock the stuff. So when the fake Chinese virus, which Trump made worse and cost himself a re-election because he shut down the economy and did the PPP program, and I said it, he's going to lose, and he did. That's because he was a coward. He should have led. And he's being a coward today politically. But I always thought at Harvard Business School this was crazy. Like, what happens if you can't get the stuff? I would actually in production operation management class, but that's the theory. That theory is now going away. Everybody's going to stock a lot of stuff. And so you're going to see an enormous trade deficit reported in the first quarter because everybody tried to get as much aluminum into the country from Canada before the tariffs went on, or cars, or Porsches, or whatever, right? So they're sitting around here, right? What's the name? RH, Restoration Homes, whatever this publicly traded company is. They're like, we're in a better position. We have $200 million. We've got $200 million of inventory in the country before the tariffs went on. Well, if the tariffs keep going, what does that even mean? I mean, I don't decide the stock's going from 400 to 120, I think. So, but they're all going to be hurting. And the real crime is what you mentioned at the beginning. What happens to the middle class? I can give you an example. You can almost look out the window here and see some white fencing. And I was going to replace it 7 years ago. And I called the lady in Wisconsin and I said to her, I'd like to buy your metal fencing, blah, 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 beautiful dark green color. And we talked on the phone. I told her, I said, look at this video I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. Well, about 3 hours later, she calls me back. This is a husband and wife operation out of Wisconsin. See, I make the mistake that it must be made in America. What do you mean? It's just, and she says, Mr. Laffey, I don't think you're going to buy anything from us. It's all made in China. I'm like, what? How can it be cheaper to send it from China? He said, we tried to make it in America, but about 6 years ago, the prices, blah, blah, blah. We had to start getting it all in from China. So I didn't buy, so I still have plastic fences out there in my farm, and I didn't get any, right? So these are the people that if given 5 years, if given 3 years to make changes on supplies, right? They could have made the change. Now they can't. Now,
Steve,
and
I'm
then it gets
just
back to who
confused.
pays those tariffs, which is like the important thing that no one seems to understand. Like, who pays the tariffs? And Trump will call it a tax cut along with his crazy person, trade people around him, right? And they'll say it's a tax cut. And then in this morning, the reasons for these tariffs go back and forth, back and forth. With China, this morning, it went back, according to the Treasury Secretary, to fentanyl, which means that they're losing. But the middle
Steve,
class will really suffer because there's not enough time to make these things happen, right? Even just with Canada. Now, if you take on one person like China, slowly but surely, and then you let Canada alone and you just kind of do some stuff with each country, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. But the real problem for people listening is that when you're dealing with a true narcissist, remember, Trump doesn't take advice from people. That people keep saying this. He says things, and the sycophants around him, the people who kiss his ring, who want the job in power, they're billionaires. They don't care. They just do what he says. Look what happened with the Signal phone call about a war, about attacking the Houthis. Trump said, let's attack. And they had this giant meeting about it. He didn't say, get in the war room. I want to hear when we're doing it. He just said, attack them. And then, of course, they threw Europe. The whole thing is an amateur hour squared. I mean, I've never heard anything like this. I've never heard anything like this in a private company. But that's what's going on with trade. He's saying stuff, and now people who are ruining their reputations, the Secretary of Commerce is going to go out in disgrace. Disgrace, Lutnick, billionaire, just can't speak on TV.
Right.
The Secretary Treasurer, he wants a 3-3-3 program. He's on TV today trying to defend all this stuff and talking about things he has no business talking about as a Treasury Secretary, because rates are rising today because of the policies of Donald Trump, because what's happened is that the emperor has no clothes. We have a giant debt problem bigger than all our problems. And it's being exposed by Trump and this mad budget process that they're not cutting anything. The Doge people aren't cutting anything. And he's leaving. And if there's one person no one should have listened to on this was Elon Musk, because the truth is he has his own personal problems. He's a brilliant engineer. Brilliant, and he'll be fine. You know why he'll be fine? Tesla goes to zero. They confiscate SpaceX. They take away PayPal, whatever, everything. You know what he has? He's got like $8 to $20 billion in cash. Billion, not million. So he doesn't care. He's having fun. You can't have people around you that are just having fun. Over the weekend, what did he say about trade? He threw everybody, Lighthouser, Elon Musk over the weekend says he wants a free trade agreement with no tariffs with Europe, with the United States of America. So now Lighthouser calls him a car manufacturer. He assembles cars, as if all Elon Musk is a brilliant man. I'm not, bad personal life. I mean, I don't agree with a lot of stuff he says and so forth, but he's a brilliant guy. So now there's this fight because what people get sucked into with Trump, right? Rudy Giuliani, hero of 9/11, dies in disgrace whenever he died. Be disgrace. Everybody who touches Trump leaves in disgrace. There's only one guy left who has a chance, Secretary of State.
Yeah, Rubio, yeah.
If he leaves today, he's got a chance. It's a very short time. It's like John Bolton stayed for a little while and said, the guy's nuts. I tried. I really tried. I'm out. Rubio should do that, then run for president. Like, I tried. I'm now running against him. This guy's a complete clown. I can't keep saying these stupid things. But he's not going to do it, I don't think.
Steve, I want to ask you this because I'm down here in Orlando now near Disney. The restaurants are packed every night of the week. The weekends, it doesn't matter what restaurant. It could be a very nice restaurant. It could be a chain restaurant. Throughout Disney, they got very expensive restaurants. They're all packed. There's people here in droves. It's not just foreign people. It's American people. It seems like the tariffs, they have no clue or it doesn't affect them yet, or they're not even looking ahead. Is this the education system where they're not looking ahead to what's about to happen in this country, where the goods are going to go really sky high out of control, where there are going to be shortages of different things? Or are these people just, it doesn't affect them? I can't grasp this because, again, everybody's just spending money. They're just swiping those credit cards like they're kid toys.
Their rationale of lots of people like this are, one, you said the education system, yes, but two, last time the government just sent them checks. There was no reconciliation of budgets. And last time,
$1,200, Steve. It's not $20,000.
I know, but this is their thought process. Some people got $6,000 to $9,000, right? So that's one part of it. Two, home equity prices rose, so lots of the homeowners are like, great, my home price. I bought a home for $300 down in Florida, even though Florida's having a problem with condos. But in America, there's so much equity left. But the truth is, and we all underestimated this, how long would it take for people to spend this extra money and so forth, right? It took a lot longer for people to go through it than economists thought. But I think they are through it. The third part of what's really happening is none of it's affected them yet. So, but what do we see happening in the economy? We see foreclosures on car loans rising to the highest since 2008. We could go through a litany of things, a credit card debt, boop, 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 boop. So people are still not everywhere. The guy in Delta says people and regular people are starting to cut back. So you'll see it in different parts of the economy, right? There's also this thing called the wealth effect. So the stock market's still extraordinarily expensive by historical standards, right? So you will see these things you think are going to happen. And I think they're going to happen quicker sometimes too, because I know they're going to happen, right? I know we're in a recession. It won't get reported for 6 months. Even if the first quarter is negative due to, say, and then we have a terrible second quarter, April, March, we won't really get that official number till July. And there'll be a revision of that. So then there's a thought process that the Fed will come to the rescue, right? So things will be fine. And by the way, they have. Here's the real problem that I've talked about, which I think now is here. I talked about it when I ran for president. I said it's going to happen. There was the initial flurry of bank failures in 2022, and then the Fed stepped in again. But with rates rising and half of our debt having to be rolled, issued, reissued over the next 3 years, you're going to see higher rates, real rates, no matter what. If we get zero inflation, because the money supply really isn't growing at 6% or it's going lower, that people that things start to, and oil stays at $50 a barrel because oil will feed into that PPI, producer price index, which will feed a couple months later into the CPI. You could have zero inflation and a 10-year treasury yielding 5%. Real rates, the difference between inflation and the 10-year treasury should be about 2%. The time value of money, et cetera, et cetera. But if they're five, you're still not going to recover from that. And it leads you into what the House and the Senate are doing on the budget, which is spending more money. There only seems to be two rational people left in Congress. A guy named Tom Massey lives in a hut somewhere in Kentucky, went to MIT, solar panels, but at least he walks out of a meeting and says, I'm not doing that. He's a real fiscal conservative. And Rand Paul, who gets on TV and says, what? They have really no effect, but I can't think of anybody else. Even the Freedom Caucus in the House of Representatives, what are they doing? They're not doing anything to my knowledge, right? So this is a real problem. And this is what Trump's actions about trade has done to take away, and I say the emperor with no clothes, to expose America's debt why we're in such a precarious situation. It's all out there now. And that's why the dollar's getting weaker.
Are you worried about a stock market crash?
Yeah. I lived through, well, there's a flash crash in 2010, but I started my career in 1987 in April at Payne Weber as an over-the-counter trader out of Harvard Business School. And I was always mystified, just so people know, I'm 24 years old, whatever I am, right? I'm mystified all throughout August, the markets rally, August of 87. But I know that I learned in corporate finance class that that as rates rose, the alternative to stocks would be like that back then, 9%, you know? And I was like, why is it, something's wrong? But again, I didn't have any money really. I was poor and I was just starting to make a living. So then from August until the crash, we saw a crash. What happened the day of the crash? The Fed came in for the first time. This is the beginning of what we call the Fed put, which is a disaster for America. They come in and save the day by printing money. Now, the debt was really low. Reagan was president. But what happened after that, and then Greenspan comes along and he keeps doing it. We have a Mexican problem. They go solve that one. There's even one with people don't remember this. Long-term capital was the name of a hedge fund that was 30 to 1 levered into Russia. And the Fed came in for that, had a meeting with banks. We got to bail them out, just some bunch of hedge fund managers. So that has come all the way to 2008 disaster where they really went in, right? And in 2020, when they really came in, but look what the Fed did 6 months ago. They were selling off their bonds, $60 billion a month. They turned it to 30 billion. And last month, everybody should have picked up on this. They're only selling 5 billion a month. Nothing. They know what's going on. But how are they going to lower rates when inflation for the short term is still seeming to go up? Because the last time they lowered rates in September, the 10-year yield was 3.67. Today it's 4.4. They're looking at it going, the Fed will never say this publicly, but the Fed only controls short-term rates. But they've lost control of long-term rates. And that was always the problem I talked about that's going to happen in America, and it's happening now.
Steve, obviously different mechanics, but do you believe this could be something like 2008, maybe worse?
If Trump goes on this, it doesn't have an out ramp. I mean, I believe there's so let's back up. What could be his off ramp, to use the vernacular, right? One would be just, there's a deal with Vietnam, whatever, this tiny little country, right? Nike stock goes up because remember, Nike moved stuff to Vietnam because they were told to, right? So Nike stock goes up and some stocks go up and he declares victory. And he says, we get these negotiations, everything looks good. And he goes back to a 10% tariff on everybody. And then for a while, you don't have this disaster. But if you go in this direction where nobody can actually operate, The European Union just put 25% tariffs on stuff in America, right? If you're using a formula for tariffs that nobody understands, not a single person in the United States of America can defend the ratio they've come up with. I go through it with you again if you want, but no one, no, not a single person, nobody at AI, no artificial intelligence can find the economist, nobody. They just made it up. So when you're doing stuff like that, I don't know. I don't know how Trump gets the off ramp. In other words, I don't know how Trump declares victory because I think this is the problem of taking on $85 trillion of GDP when you only have 30, is that they all are now like, screw them. I mean, that's what Europe's saying.
Well, there's
That's what
more numbers on the other side, and that's the
that's
problem.
what Doug Ford, who runs, everything east of the Mississippi, could figuratively for America. He's their chancellor up in Ontario. He's like, I'm not even going to send you electricity. Now they're not letting him do that yet, but they're ready to they're so if we have something like that, we have something that we haven't seen in a lifetime way worse than 2008. I'm not saying that's going to happen. What I am saying is that the bond vigilantes are now going to be in control of our debt because we're going to have high real rates, and then you're going to see major cuts, and you're going to see higher income tax. All of this could have been solved by a fair tax, a flat tax, by Trump actually going to Congress with a congressman and passing some real laws. He still refuses to do anything but executive orders.
Right. And we've
That's the
spoken
whole
about,
problem. And creating the uncertainty that it's never going to change, Rob.
yeah.
Now,
Eh,
I want to make sure I say one thing. Anybody
yeah.
listening who still says he's got this magic thing, three-dimensional chess, he's a master negotiator. If you're still saying that, you're an idiot. I don't want to insult you. There is no evidence that when he dealt with North Korea or Russia in his first term, or what he did in taking his companies bankrupt when he piled out of them himself, right? Made all this money. There's no evidence that he's a very successful investor. His father gave him $300 million like 40 years ago. How
Yeah.
much would you have in treasuries?
Yeah. And the
More than
difference
him.
in money is very
There's
substantial.
no evidence. It's amazing that, and this is the problem, our culture is narcissistic. We've elected a man who had a
Right.
TV show and fired people
Okay.
and has been saying crazy things and changing his mind on all of them forever. Go watch the clip on YouTube of him and David Letterman 25 years ago when he's saying buy stuff in America, and Letterman pulls out a Trump whatever from his hotel and says this was made in China. And Trump goes, like you got me, but he doesn't care. He just keeps going. But
Yeah.
only our culture would allow someone the diametric opposite of Eisenhower or Truman to be president. It's our problem. We have to
Steve,
change.
Steve, I want to be gracious with your time. I know time is ticking.
Yeah.
So let's go to the last question and talk about, because we have spoken about the tariffs. We've kind of beat that a little bit with the drum. I do want to move towards the budget reconciliation, excuse me, bill, which God knows if it's even going to happen. There is the talk about the cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I know the Trump administration is saying that's not true. The Republican Congress is saying, yes, it is. I want to go a little deeper into this because, again, and maybe we'll differ on this, maybe we won't. There's never any cuts to defense. I'm not saying that we should cut it a huge amount, but we should look at some cuts there. The last chance we've had to cut defense was during the Obama administration through the sequestration bill, where they kind of put the cause a pause and they did some cuts with defense and also other spending. Obviously, that went away without the at the end, excuse me, of the Obama administration. But there's also a budget that's never spoken about, which will never be touched too, is the Black Ops budget, which God knows how many trillions of
Right.
dollars that is in the defense. We don't even have to go into that. But just to kind of end the question here,
Yeah. Well,
Social Security, I'm probably not going to get it.
right.
That's, the way it is. That's the way the cookie crumbles. I could get it if they did something correctly, but they don't. I am there a little bit worried about the cuts to Medicaid and Medicare because again, we've went through this, and I don't know if you knew this about me, Steve, but during 2020 when I had the issue with the vaccine and I was having issues with vertigo and many other medical
Right.
issues, and I couldn't work, I went on Medicaid for a few years, and it saved my life because I had to go to a lot of doctor's appointments and try to get some help. And if I didn't, I would have had to pay a subsistent amount of medical bills there, which probably would have put me under. So again, there's people
Yeah.
that need these programs,
Yeah.
such as Medicare, Medicaid, but they will not touch the Trump tax cuts. They will not go to the fair tax, as you spoke about. They will not look at the Black Ops budget. They will not look at some defense spending cuts. Again, we want to keep the country safe, but you have to look at every place where there could be some cuts and make the cuts. There should be nothing off limits.
Right. And it's good. And that's what's going to have to happen. So to back up, the four departments you mentioned, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and defense, along with interest on the debt, are almost $5 trillion of our $7 trillion spending. I'm just making it up. It's roughly a trillion for each of them, but it's not, right? So to take them in turn, yes, when Trump mentions 1890 as the greatest time of all time before we went to the Depression with the McKinley tariffs before he became president in the 1870s to 1913, I watched him yesterday say this were the greatest times. We didn't have any of this stuff. We had military, very small military. We didn't have any of this stuff. So he thinks we're going back, like we just could have tariffs and they could pay for everything. It's not happening. So to backtrack, it would have been better for the US dollar if we had solved one of the three Medicare problems. Social Security is the easiest one to fix for young people. It's at stevelaffey.com. It's not even my plan. It's Larry Kotlikoff's plan. It costs more money, but it would ultimately help the middle class over a long period of time and a short period of time because you'll get it and you'll get a lot more. And that way you'll feel better about your job. But I'm not going to go there today.
Sure.
They won't touch Social Security right now, except they don't want to tax Social Security, which will raise a deficit. They probably should tax Social Security. Listen, I'm 63. They don't. I'll take advantage of it like I take advantage of solar panels and electric cars when I need 10,000 bucks. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't take advantage, just all stupid. Medicaid's a different thing. We need to go and look at Medicaid because, for example, in the state of California, 37% of every citizen is on Medicaid. That can't be the right number. But we've got to maintain it for people who run into a problem. They can't work. They lost a leg. They went blind, whatever. We're all, I like to say this for 80, 90% of Americans, we're all in on that.
Steve, isn't that more of an economic problem for the state with the about affordability of, what's going on
Yes,
with state housing more so than Medicaid itself?
yes. Well, the problem runs like this. Because we split Medicaid among states and federal government, there are some states like California, and I haven't looked at this in a long time, who run into deficits on it and never pay people back. Like they just abuse the whole thing, right? It's sort of like Social Security disability. There was a judge somewhere, it was in the Wall Street Journal, who put 90% of the people who came before him said, okay, yeah, you should have Social Security disability. Some people were just like, I just want Social Security disability instead of the fact that they have cancer or they have something that they can prove, or, that they can't work anymore. Fine. So we can take the expenses of these things down somewhat. Medicare is different. There's Advantage Medicare. There's all these different things that we go into. Here's the problem. The Doge people aren't looking at this thing rationally. Like if I ran things, if you put me in charge, I would say, one, I can't do all this at once. In the first 6 months, I'm going to do just Medicaid. I'm going to come back and we're going to have a bill about how we change this, how we require people who are on Medicaid to show up more or to prove a little bit more. So we don't have people who don't deserve on it, get on it. The other problem that never gets spoken about for these type of programs are the fact that the marginal rate for people to get off Medicaid, get off poverty, the marginal rates of losing your housing allowance or whatever you might be getting sometimes runs well over 100%. So I'll make the numbers up again. You're in New York, you're on Medicaid, and you got some housing allowance, and you're living in some high rise you don't want to live in, but it's subsidized, and you make 20 grand in a family of four, and you can stay on it, and you go make $21,000, and they're going to take away your whole housing allowance, which is $12,000. So we don't have this is what I would do if I ran things. I put really smart people and say, how do we make sure that people, as they rise out of poverty, never face more than a 20% marginal tax rate? So they're like, I can go from 20 to 30. I'll lose 20% of my housing allowance, but I keep 8 grand. Okay, I'll do it. That's one of the biggest problems that doesn't show up in Medicaid. doesn't show up in Social Security disability, but it's part of a larger problem where if you had a different tax code, we could do this. The problem is that they're not going to do anything about this. Like none of the stuff. Now, defense, listen, we can rationalize a lot of these things, but now we can't because we're not going to build them with France anymore. So, for example, whoever's building the new Lockheed, whatever, Europe's not going to buy any of it. Like the way we make some money is that we produce an F-35 for our allies and ourselves. Because if you make one, I make the number up, it's 100 billion. If you make 7,000, it's 40 billion per plane. But now we've lost that advantage. So Trump is losing all the advantages of keeping our allies close, right? And not having everybody look under the proverbial debt window and say they can't pay the debt. But now everybody's looking under the window and saying, I'll give you one last statistic about this whole thing. 20 years ago, roughly foreigners owned 3 trillion of all of our bonds, not just the treasuries, but bonds, corporate bonds. Today they own 24 trillion. Who benefited? America. That number is going to start going down.
Right.
Hurting America, causing higher rates because of one person's idiocy this year. If Trump had kept it just immigration, kept the tax code, I don't agree with the tax code, just so you know. I mean, my conservative friends disagree with me. I thought the 2017 tax cuts were abysmal.
Yeah.
We need a different, so I wouldn't have voted for him. But what he's doing is literally opening up Pandora's box that can't be closed, even if it's partially closed. We're not going to have the same relationship with Canada, I would say ever. It's not true ever for the next 5 years.
Yeah. And we can end there, Steve. I'm a little disappointed with my vote for President Trump. If I could go back, I don't think I would have pulled the trigger. But that's par for the course. Now, Steve, just last point as we call a close here. $3 or $4 trillion went missing right before 9/11 in the Defense Department, in the Pentagon. The investigation went on. They never found where that money was. And that was many, many years ago, 24 years ago now. And that's the way the cookie crumbles. When we talk about wasting money, when you're losing $3, $4, $5 trillion, that could go to a lot of programs to help a lot of poor and middle class people. But we'll close there. SteveLaffey.com. Thanks so much.
Great show. All right.
Steve, can I give you a call in a minute? I just had one quick question, but I know.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm going to rush around, but I'll pick up the phone.
All right. Catch you in a bit.
Let me turn my Zoom thing off. I have it on total